I don't wanna go downtown. I don't wanna mess around. All I think about is your lips, your kiss. I don't wanna have a drink, have a random little fling. All I wanna do is show up at your place and say, let's try this again. I wonder if you think of me.
TGIF, everyone. Happy Friday. Are we getting bored with that intro? Maybe I should switch it up a little. Let me know. We're good? Okay.
I like it.
You like it? Okay.
Yeah, we can always play around with it, though.
Yeah. I work in retail marketing, and, we have this thing, like, you just have to switch it up so that people, don't get bored and go to another coffee shop. You got to work on the window display. So what's on the menu, people, today? How
There's
we
nothing
feeling?
going on in the world. I don't know what we have.
There's nothing going on at all. People are getting along. People are getting along.
Yep, we're celebrating freedom all around, and
Celebrating freedom around.
nobody's in opposition to it at all.
Rainbow flags.
Absolutely at peace worldwide.
Mhm. We're still doing rainbow flags. Are we? Is that rainbow flag still around? Is it? It's Pride Month, right? I mean, I should know. Baxter seems to think so.
Do we even call it a rainbow flag anymore? It's got the 10,000 colors on it. Is it?
Yeah, it's got 10,000 colors, so it's ran out of space. So yeah, they're not. I'm not seeing much rainbow flags here in New York, actually, and I don't know when the Pride Parade is scheduled. It seems like people are have other concerns these days between the. So yesterday, was it yesterday or the day before, there was a news about a random stabbing in Grand Central Station, of all places, and the guy is still on the loose. So I guess it'd be hard to go around waving a flag if there's a serial stabber on the loose. But
Yeah, that usually is what keeps me from waving the flag.
Yeah. Anyway, so what are we roasting today, people?
Well, you had a few topics I thought were interesting. The state of the big beautiful bill is very interesting to me. The negotiations and based on what we talked about a couple weeks ago. Especially my pet project, the SALT deduction, has become a nightmare, as I predicted. It's like,
yeah, what is going on with that? I mean, because nobody's really talking about the big beautiful bill. We're talking about all the other distracting items that don't directly affect us. So
before we just go on the big bold beautiful bill, I think it's important to catch people up with the timeline right now. Right, I believe the big bold PBB is the next. It's the next step is that it has to be passed by the Senate. If I'm correct, right? I don't think that's been scheduled yet, or people are not clear when that is scheduled.
It's supposed to be next week. They're going to try and do it before the 4th. The Senate has it, and the way it normally works is the Senate's going to make adjustments, and the House is trying to say that you can't do that. We've already made it perfect. You guys can't come in pulling threads, or it's gonna blow up. And Trump's mad. And we have Ron Johnson and Rick Scott, and not just Rand Paul. There's several that are like, the spending needs to come down. We need to fix some of this stuff. But then you also have, some of the other senators who are, unfortunately, there's a lot of Republican, representatives and Republican senators whose districts, and there's businesses in their districts who are benefiting greatly from the Green New Deal subsidies. And as what happens with government spending, a lot of times it hooks, people who are even, consider themselves Republican. This is gobs and gobs and gobs of money coming out of Washington for various industries with, the best of intentions, green this, solar this, EV this. And there are businesses that make money and employ people based on this free, it's not free money, but it's funny money from the federal government. And so it's insidious. This is why the House was not able to cut to essentially just reject the entire. You remember, it was the Green New Deal, and Biden renamed it the Inflation Reduction Act, which is, I don't know about you guys, but when they did that, I was just like, really? Like, you can't just rename something, the Hug the Fluffy Puppies Act, when it does something totally different. But they did, and they
That's
had
what they always do, though. This isn't any different. That was the most flagrant example of that. I mean, but the Affordable Care Act was also
Same.
named
of course.
inappropriately.
They're great at naming these bills.
Yes.
So let me if they make these, I think the word is rescission, right? I've been hearing the word rescission
Because it's a money bill. It doesn't need it doesn't, it's not subjected to the veto. They can pass it with 51.
Okay, so but does it have to go back to the lower chamber, the House, when
Yes. If the Senate makes any changes, the House has to vote again.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so the swamp part of the GOP and Congress are, but what is the game plan for that? Because if the likes of Rand Paul and if Rand Paul and all the others, small government types do take out the bad part and they send it back to the lower the Congress. I mean, they have to know that those people there are going to, like, how is this going to end? That's what I'm not clear. Right? They don't.
It's going to be Trump twisting arms.
Twisting
I think
arms in
most people
Congress.
are rooting. Most of the base is rooting for the Senate to make it better. Frankly, to pull out some more spending. We've already seen the SALT. They took it back down to where it was to begin with, which was $10K. There's a rumor that they might even lower it to $0. The representative from Rockland in New York, Lawler, who we talked about last time. Again, this guy, I don't understand how this guy is walking around. Like this guy has been the poison pill for Trump's big beautiful bill from the very beginning. Mike Lawler. It just he came out of the gate and like right after Trump got elected and said, "I'm gonna raise SALT to $200K a year, and if you don't, I'm gonna blow everything up." And in my humble opinion, I think Trump made a really bad calculated error in that he decided to allow Lawler to do that. And then he aimed his guns at the fiscal conservatives, the Freedom Caucus, the Chip Roys and the Thomas Masseys and the Rand Paul and the Rick Scotts of the world, and now the Ron Johnsons. I think Trump underestimated the popularity of Doge. Elon's big blow up with Trump did not help. I think that, it sucks for somebody who wants fiscal responsibility and less spending. To see Elon kind of flame out like that was a bummer. I think that he could have been much more effective if he'd have just played it a little bit more mature, frankly. But what's going to happen is the Senate's going to bring the SALT, because you got to remember the SALT. I don't have the exact numbers, but like there is like $425 billion extra of deficit spending in the big beautiful bill. SALT, the SALT cap, if you just left it so the increase to 40 represents 380 billion of that, right? So this is like the biggest price tag of all this stuff. And like it or not, the CBO scoring, I agree that it's flawed. They don't take into account the growth that you get from tax cuts as much as they should, but that's what they do. That's how they're jiggered. And it's a known entity. I mean, they knew this going in, that the CBO and others are going to be looking for offsets and pay-fors. And the SALT deduction represents the biggest pay-for and offset in this bill. And it was so stupid for them to allow the Queen to be knocked off the chessboard before the first move was even made in
Yeah.
negotiations. And that's the issue I have with this. I think it was
Yeah, I mean, there's
really
so much in this bill that is a big one. I agree with you, Eric. And
So
but I
we
mean,
have
I don't live in
to,
a state where that's going to be in effect. Ohio doesn't. We don't have to deal with that, but it is a big part of offsetting the bill. Now, the question is, at this point, we can't do anything about it, though.
well, I think that the senators are going to either, like I said, it's already down at 10. There are several senators that want to take it to 0, because if they take it to
Okay.
0, the
Okay,
whole thing's paid for. You know what I mean? That's how big SALT is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, look, I mean, in theory, this idea that you have to pay for tax cuts, I really have a problem with it, because
Yeah, so
what
do
that
I.
means is that you're not cutting government, right? And it's
Correct.
weird. It's like, just cut
Correct.
government. You don't have to pay for a tax cut. Just cut,
Correct.
cut people's
Yes.
taxes and cut spending, and we're good,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So
And that's my problem with the big beautiful bill, because there's still loads of spending in here. Now, there's some parts of spending that I agree with, like a lot of the immigration increases to the Department of Homeland Security for enacting immigration rules. I agree with, but there's a couple of things in there, but there's a lot of spending parts of this budget that I disagree with. And my biggest frustration with all of this, is what you just said, Eric, is that we feel like we have to offset something to create a quote unquote balanced budget. Well, I can't emphasize this enough. I don't know if I've said it on this show, but I've said it a bunch of times. The budget is always going to be balanced, because they are always going to spend what they want to spend and rely on tax revenue to pay for it, whether or not we have it in the current fiscal year or not. They are still going to spend whatever they want to spend. So it will always be the budget that's created will always be balanced. The goal, what we wanted from America First, was to actually cut spending. What we wanted from Doge was to identify the areas where we could cut spending. And we were excited to see all of that. And it's still very disappointing that a lot of that is not happening, or it's being replaced by spending in another place. And the other issue is that, so Elon had his hissy fit, and he expected a lot. He expected way too much from this Congress, because this Congress is not filled with America First people. This will segue into us talking about the divisions and in the Republican Party, but that is a big part of it. And it was partly naivete on his part, partly, he thought that he would probably be getting something out of this, personally out of this. And he took a lot of losses with Tesla stock and everything, personal business
yes, he did.
issues, right? And so
I don't blame him either.
I
I'd be
can
pissed
see
too.
his frustration from that, but he did not understand the behemoth that he was running up against. This is what we saw with Trump the very first term. We saw all of the swamp preventing him from enacting all of these things that we wanted him to do in the first time. Did you not think that was going to happen again?
Yeah.
I just don't. It was just, completely naive. There's a lot of other people who have theories that, Elon had, that this was all planned and whatever. I don't get into all of that.
Oh, it was a theater.
Yeah, that this was all
professional
theater or
wrestling.
whatever.
Maybe.
I see this. This is their personality. They both, they played it just the way they normally would act. Like, well, it wasn't atypical at all. So I wasn't surprised. I actually made fun of it, and I saw quite a few videos and memes, and had some fun with it. But in the end, it is a problem. We are not getting what we wanted, and people are settling for what amounts to about $1 trillion in cuts, but we could have gotten that stuff with a few things cut anyway.
Absolutely.
So not everything that Doge identified. So I think that we're not getting everything that we want. Now, there's some good things in it. I'm not going to say that there isn't something that's good in the bill. It's not all sour, but it is still very swampy.
And I think that the argument that this is a rescission, not a rescission bill, this is it's not a normal bill, right? Like they can't. There's a lot of mandatory spending that can't be cut in this bill. It's not really the place to do a lot of the Doge cuts. You totally understand.
Correct. Like you can't, like defunding the Department of Education, that kind of stuff. It's not going to happen in here.
I think a lot of the confusion with the America First base is that this bill was not supposed to double as a budget bill either. Correct me if I'm wrong.
It is a budget bill.
It is. That's the only way they could do it. Reconciliation is what they have to do because of the slim majority.
But that was the confusion. I mean, like I'm still kind of confused now. Like if you had the America First agenda, couldn't you have just treated that as a bill in itself? Why does it have to be piggybacked to spending bills, which Trump should know by now? It's not going to be something that could be resolved.
It's not. This bill can only do, because it's a reconciliation bill, it's only legally allowed to do certain things, which is why they've floated doing these rescission bills and doing the Doge cuts separately. Because it's reconciliation, it allows them to pass it with a simple majority in the Senate, I believe.
Because of the reconciliation.
But again, because of the nature of that kind of bill, there's a lot of the stuff that we would like to see and Elon would like to see just technically cannot be done in this bill. But there's still a lot of, there's still a lot of cuts that could be made. And it's just the stuff that's politically a lot more difficult. Remember, Josh Hawley was out there like, you cannot cut Medicaid no matter what you do. And he kind of embraced it like this weird talking point. And I think he got to Trump, and Trump was like, we're not cutting Medicaid. And again, that's the third rail, right? We know that, when you talk about cutting, reducing the Social Security age for people who are currently 17, right? Which doesn't affect anybody who's currently getting it. It's got to be done, by the way.
My role.
They're like, oh, you're cutting Social Security. It's just, it's just this political theater that, people who are halfway.
Okay, I'm just saying my role in this panel is to be the person who doesn't understand things, and I'm asking the questions that most people I think will be asking. So again, going back, it's not clear to me if you have a set of America First agenda. We're talking about like stuff you will need to be done right away, right? Immigration. Think of something else like election integrity.
No, again, that's not this bill. What you're trying to do with this bill are the tax cuts. This is, no tax.
Okay, well, I'm telling you right now that this is the problem I have with a lot of pundits. We assume that most people get what we get. They don't. They're going into this thinking it's America first. It's going to save America. These are the first, like stop the bleeding kind of bill. Like there's all this crisis going on. People are not getting that. Wait a minute, there's all this like bookkeeping and accounting that's attached to this thing too. That's what I'm saying. That's why there's so much confusion.
It was poor communication.
How many people know what rescission mean until recently? None.
I think it was bad communication from the start on Trump's part, because you're right. It's like, this is complicated. And you had Doge going on simultaneously. It was very popular. I would agree that if you had to think about Trump's victory in terms of mandates, in terms of the things that he promised, right? I'm not sure if Doge was up there. I don't know if he had necessarily a mandate from the election to do Doge. That said, there was a sizable percentage, and I would say Doge and Maha are kind of similar. Probably add up to about 4 or 5% of what Trump's victory. So they're not nothing. It's not the 35% core base. It's the icing on top that helped getting over with independence. But I would argue, I think what we're all saying here, and it sounds, Nikki, like you're saying the same thing, is, in my opinion, I think that Trump misread the room, and I think he kind of misunderstood the mandate that he has, which I do think now includes Doge. I think that it was very popular. In terms of, the waste, fraud, and abuse, even though I think Elon was out there. I don't know if he was doing it correctly. He was a bit of a bull in a china shop, but who cares? Cut this shit, reduce the size of government, close these agencies. They're just stealing our money. And then when this bill comes along, even though technically it can't handle, because it's a reconciliation bill, it can't do a lot of the DOGE stuff that everybody would like to happen. My point is that I think Team Trump made a tactical error in not explaining that better up front, because what we saw last week was Stephen Miller out, tweeting his face off, trying to talk people off the ledge. It was a couple weeks ago, talk people off the ledge because they were pissed. And I was one of them. It was just like, you guys are not only not cutting, you're increasing things that you don't need to increase. And Trump is a natural big
Let's go
spender.
backwards though, because I think Percy's question is an excellent one. I don't think a lot of people understand the difference and why right now it's a budget resolution bill and not an appropriation
And
bill.
that's what I was saying. Trump did not attempt to explain it. He did not get out in front of it.
No, I'm not saying, I'm not even like getting at that at all. I think people don't understand what we're talking about. I think that's what Percy was asking.
Well,
it's
that's
like,
what I'm
so I
saying.
think that people
That
don't
sounds like their
understand
problem.
the difference between.
No, we can't say that. I'm sorry. We can't stop. We can't say that it's people's problem. I like to think that we're serving.
How dumbed down does it have to be to get some of these people to come along?
Okay, let me just explain. Give me a minute. So if people don't understand, every year Congress has to pass there's a Congressional Budget Act that requires Congress to adopt a budget resolution once per year. Okay. And so it has to be a resolution to set kind of like almost like the framework of all the spending that Congress is going to do. You do it in a resolution style format. It allows a simple majority to pass. It's filibuster proof. That is the point of doing that. Once the budget resolution is passed for the year, then you can do specific appropriation bills. What we're saying here is that there are a lot of things that are included in this bill that Trump wanted to be included in the resolution bill rather than waiting for future appropriations. Was to try and get it done and get that part of the agenda done.
Okay.
Right. That's really that's the simplified version.
Thank you for the explanation, Nikki. Sorry to cut you up, Eric. So I'm just trying to speak for that base that doesn't understand this in their mind. Okay. And this is from my survey asking people with a conversation. They have it in their mind that our legislative process, when we pass laws, it isn't always just a budget laws. Congress can also pass other laws, right? It's not always through the vehicle of through this budget law, if I'm making sense. Like if there is, let's say America First, we want to stop immigration, let's stop illegal migrants coming in. Like they could get together and pass a bill specific.
Standalone bill.
A standalone bill. This is what a lot of people are thinking. That's why they're confused. Like, wait a minute. I thought we're getting this kind of like, we're going to put out the fire quickly kind of bill with America First. We haven't got that. Okay. Migrants, election integrity.
Can't do that.
Okay. And then it's like suddenly like, wait a minute. Now it's becoming one big bookkeeping exercise. Like, what is this about?
That was sort of my point. And I'm agreeing with you guys in that my point is that yes, it's complicated. What Nikki said is absolutely accurate. The problem that I had is that, Trump, again, they didn't even attempt to sort of educate and, sort of grease the runway for this. You know what I mean? Like, I think that they just said, this is what we have to do. And it's because they're in DC. I think that they're in a bubble by definition, right? And they're trying to get this stuff done. They're looking at just DC pushback, just the politics, just the horse trading that needs to happen to do what Nikki described. And what you're asking for, these other bills, which they've already actually after the blow up with Elon and after all the complaints about this bill being expensive, they did come out and say, oh, we're going to do these rescission bills. Don't worry, we got these other bills that do these other things that you want coming down the pike. My point is that was playing catch up. Right. That was bad PR because they were having to sort of clean it up after it broke. And it was pretty obvious early on that they were kind of not paying attention to that. They were just expecting the base to go along and shut up and do it. And I would argue, and it's going to go into the next topic we talk about, one of the good things about the right, current right, and even the, Trump, not his core base, because they'll go along with anything he does, but there's a sizable part of his base that does question him. We're seeing that on Iran right now. We're seeing that on the bill, on the spending. It was very interesting to see sort of the Trump army try and go after the Freedom Caucus. And this is where I was, right? And not go after Lawler, right?
Yes.
A lot of people said the same thing that I
was
did, which is
very
like,
irritated
hey,
with that.
they're both technically holding up your shit. Why are you firing on the guys that actually want to save money? Because there's more political capital on that side than there is on the Lawler side. And so that's my main point, where they did not get out in front of it. They didn't explain it, and they aimed and fired at the wrong people.
And yes, that is a big part of it, but that is also the ignorant part of MAGA too. I don't know that I necessarily blame the Trump team for not explaining the difference in things, because honestly, once you set a budget, I mean, like, look, you set your household budget every year. Hopefully you do. You decide how much you're going to spend on certain things, but then that might shift. Each month or each quarter, you may go through and say, I need to appropriate more funds to this. That's what the appropriation bills are for. That's why there's an average about 12 per year that they're actually doing. You've already set the overall budget. You know what you can spend because you know what you're bringing in for the year. And so you can't change how much you're bringing in. This bill is basically saying this is how much we want to bring in, and this is how much we want to spend going out. That's all it's saying. That's really what it's saying. And then it's sort of dividing, and it's giving topics for things, but it's not saying how much I want to spend on each thing. Like you really can't.
And the tax cuts.
It's sort of an estimate, but it won't be the accurate amount. So then, yes, so only thing they can do with an appropriation bill is then say, this is the accurate amount that I want spent on this particular thing. That's the only thing that's going to change.
And the tax cuts.
Overall amount of spending will not change.
Right.
That is the problem that the tax cuts should be tackling. Yeah.
Right.
And that's what the Freedom Caucus was trying to avoid, which is what they always try to avoid. And that's the team that MAGA should be on. The Freedom Caucus was formed during the Tea Party movement.
That's
right. It's like, we can't keep shitting on the people who we sent there to do this particular job.
Can I
it
point out
makes them look
something?
like the opposition, like controlled opposition at this point.
I want to point out something about the importance of how you make your point clear to your market if you want them to be on your side. So one of my critique of the Freedom Caucus, and I've been with I was there with the Tea Party, I'm OG Tea Party, is that I don't think they have done a good job of contextualizing why national debt would affect them individually, why it's a matter. Like when I talk to people about national debt, it's like it's still a very abstract idea. Like you could see in this BBB a split too, right? There are people like, we should just support Trump no matter, don't question, big boat, beautiful bill. You've seen that split, like, and then you have people who are going after Thomas Massie and Rand Paul for trying to raise public awareness of why national debt is bad. I don't think Freedom Caucus has done a good job of explaining why debt is bad, which I think is ironic considering Trump is actually a businessman. He should know when he ran his business why, having these, having like an outstanding like debt.
Oh, he doesn't care. He doesn't care. He's never cared. Trump wants to please people.
Wait, but I'm just saying in his own before he got into politics, right? He that's what he's touted his why he's his credentials, that he knows how to run a business. He knows how to run a solvent business. But I think there's a disconnect there. Like if you know why it's bad to be in the red all the time and not in it, then why are you bringing this attitude to how you run the country's economy too? Because do you know what I'm saying? So I think we have to explain to people, like just to the common person, like why national debt is this bad. I don't think that's getting through yet, and that's why you're not getting a lot of people who are like, there's this recognizable majority that says the spending has to stop. Like,
do you remember Ross Perot?
No.
He ran an entire presidential campaign on this very issue.
National debt.
Yeah, Ross Perot. He ran against Bush Sr. and Clinton, and he split the Republican vote, which is why Clinton got elected. Ross Perot's only issue was the debt and the deficit, just spending. And I don't know, I think it's very similar to what we were just talking about anything that gets a little bit complex for normies doesn't work, right? And we were just talking about reconciliation versus, rescission, this stuff just goes over people's heads. Even the debt, they just want their goodies. Most people do not care. They do not care. They just want their shit. A lot of businesses just want their shit.
Nikki, how would you explain to the common MAGA base who really want to see Trump succeed, but then are not understanding maybe why national debt is an issue, why Thomas Massey and Rand Paul is what they're raising is an issue? How would you explain to them very quickly why debt as a concept is bad for anyone at any level, whether it's national or a person? Like what are the consequences of a debt?
Honestly, I think, Percy, I think this is one of those issues that everybody understands. When you don't have enough money to pay for shit, that people are going to come for you and collect and keep calling your house. The bill's going to come due. You're going to have to file bankruptcy eventually if you don't get to pay for those things, and life will not be fun. So it's just it's not.
So what would that mean on a national level? So who are the people who come and collect our debt? Is the question.
Honestly, the first thing you'd have to do is get people to understand that a country, particularly one as big as the United States, is a corporation, and people don't get that. So it is run like a corporation. Yes, there are people's lives that are affected by rules and policies made by by the corporation, but it is a corporation. So if a corporation goes bankrupt, then somebody else gets to take ownership of it. And so
I would agree. I think that people understand the basics of it.
Yeah.
But my point was that a lot of people just don't care. They're like, give me mine.
Yeah. There's also, there's a school of thought that people that think that they don't think the national debt is an issue and that we're going to be fine no matter what.
That's modern monetary theory.
Well, okay. So I'm going to ask both of you a question and then we'll move along. So is it like if you need a bridge built in your town, your government has to borrow that money to build that bridge?
Yeah.
And
the government's already borrowing money.
And if it comes to a point where your creditor says wait a minute, you still owe me from the last 10 bridges you built, you're not going to get this bridge. Is it like that?
Yes, because your credit score is now low.
Totally. Your bond rating has gone down because you haven't paid back the first one.
Yes. Your credit score is low. You do not qualify for this loan. We will not give you anything. So
okay, so
maybe here's my other point though. Mm-hmm. I mean, here's the other thing you asked me about why to address Thomas Massey and Rand Paul. Okay, great. They have fantastic ideas about being fiscally responsible, but they have not been successful at building their own coalition of like-minded Republicans, even though they're technically they're libertarians, but masquerading as Republicans. If they have not built a caucus of people or worked with the Freedom Caucus in the House or created something similar in the Senate, that they have gotten a coalition that they know that every single budget they're going to get this number of people to vote just like them, then they are effectively controlled opposition. They are useless. They are only there to talk about things. They may put out a bill, although I've not seen much from Thomas Massey. I mean, at least in terms of, just except for simple things like, defund this in a sentence. And it's like a joke because nobody's going to sign it. If you're not able to build a coalition and get people elected to run and speak and talk and do and act exactly like you, then you are ineffective at your job. I'm sorry. You may sound great. You may say the things that the people want to hear, but you're not effective. You're doing nothing. So I I don't know that people are going to buy them because they're like basically alone in a room and they have no power
Yeah,
within
I
the
would
caucus
argue that
and
that
in a
Doge.
Republican caucus. They have
I would
none.
argue that Doge was the latest,
Doge was supposed to be
incarnation of that.
Yep.
And look, I mean, Massey is pretty famous for not really writing a bunch of bills. I mean, the libertarian in me is like, great, there's too many bills, like too much legislation, too many laws, like, good for, not maybe not practical, but like on a certain level, it's like go. But these people are up against the others that we were describing, right? The entrenched interests that might seem or might claim to be conservative Republicans, but in their district, they have the Biden Green New Deal EV subsidies propping up their biggest donor, right? Making electric batteries or something, and they're not giving that up, right? That's what the Chip Roys and the Freedom Caucuses and the Rand Pauls are up against. This entrenched, and it's not that they're pure as the driven snow, but they're a lot better. They're more willing to say, you know what, let's all take the Band-Aid off at once, right? Everybody's got to take a hit. The country's in dire straits. The debt has reached, again, when Ross Perot was running, it was bad. Now it's like, it's exponentially worse. It's like, tens and tens of trillions of dollars, like just mind-boggling amounts of money. And it's so difficult. So much of our budget goes just to paying the interest on the debt. It goes back to your corporation. It's literally, we're borrowing money, and the load is becoming so enormous and so hard to get out from under, that it really does feel like everybody's kind of picking at a corpse, and they're not really trying to revive the body or save it, right? There's a plunder vibe going on right now, which is very troubling.
How much of our military currently is being it kind of lives on credit too, operationally?
Well, they're getting a raise out of the big beautiful bill.
But is it paid by borrowing too?
Absolutely. Just it's the entitlements in military are the biggest draws on the money, for sure.
But that's what I mean. Like 10 years down the line, when our credit is shot, it's already shot. Then what happens? Like
you're down to AA.
Then we just say we're not going to pay you back. It's fine. We're just gonna and we have the guns, so come and collect if you want to.
The U.S. defaulting on debt is something that is just unimaginable, frankly.
Okay. I want to point something out, and then we can move on to this split.
I actually have to hop off. So
okay.
I will see you guys next week.
Nikki, thank you so much.
Okay.
Have a great week.
Bye, Nikki.
Yeah, you too.
So I wanted to point out that I did some research into Big Bold Beautiful Bill. And it turned out that and I can't confirm this, that Mike Johnson and some other Republican, a Bush era Republican, was working on this as early as May 20th, 2025. I'm looking at.
Of course. That's how they roll. It's like the CARES Act, right? That came, to save the day in, early summer of COVID 2020. That was a recycled bill. It was like 98% the same bill that they had been, crafting behind the scenes, and they just re-swiped it.
Yeah. I think I'm just bringing that up because I had to be curious about that first, like who wrote that portion that is causing so much issue for Trump and everyone, and I don't think a lot of people who even support Trump and just want him to succeed and fast track this know that. I'm just going to read this here. It says that it was sponsored mostly by Jody Arrington from Texas. He's the Congressional District 19, Texas, and Mike Johnson as early as May 20th, 2025. And I don't think that is, in May 20th, May 2025, where was Trump? He was nowhere. Like he's not like America First was barely,
2025, you said?
Yeah. Yes.
That's a month and a half ago?
No. 2025, May 20th, 2025. This bill started before Trump got into office. If you look it up.
You do know what year it is now, right? It's 2025 now. You're saying
no. Sorry, he introduced it in May 2025. I'm sorry, but no. I'm sorry. I got that wrong.
I know what you're saying. You don't have to keep digging. The fact is that this bill was largely written
before
a long time ago, and that's what they do.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah,
it's hard to write these bills, especially these big omnibus things. They have interests. They probably were watching the campaign, and at that point, Trump is at the very least the Republican nominee, right? So you got it. These things are huge. They require a lot of man hours, a lot of legal eyeballs and things. It's an effort. It doesn't surprise me that it started a long time ago. I don't know if people really care, as long as it can do most of what they want it to do.
Oh, true, but I think people should also generally be curious about how the sausage is made too, and who makes them. So we can't always necessarily point the finger at Trump, and him going along with it is another story. But it helps to know the beginnings of these bills.
Yeah, I think he does get a lot of leeway still, because he is still an outsider, even though he's been there for a while now. And the swamp is the swamp. I think most people who are at least halfway paying attention know that the sausage factory, right? It gets made. This stuff's complicated. Trump is he's not a king, right? He has to kind of, roll with the machinery to a large degree, right?
Yeah. So, do we want to touch on the other
let's move on
that are happening? I don't know how far we want to go into that. It's like,
which one?
What's happening?
Infighting
happening overseas, and I don't know, like Tucker Carlson, Candace. I first of all, those people never really I don't take those people seriously, so I don't know why we are forming fault lines around them. They're just people with a mic. They're just talking heads to me. I don't take my geopolitical know-hows from those people. But
a lot of people do. And Tucker is very popular. Candace Owens has a pretty big audience. We saw this with the Gaza situation, and there was a split in MAGA. It wasn't huge with the Palestinian thing, but there are definitely some elements of MAGA that are they're kind of tired of Israel. They're tired of the ties to the country of Israel. There's some conspiracy stuff baked in there, but we saw that happen, October 7th of last year through the campaign and up till now. And then, a week ago, with this Iran thing, we start to see the schism with the anti-war or the more isolationists in the MAGA, in the base. And again, they're not muy MAGA, right? There's still that super core of Trump support that he can, again, shoot that person in the middle of Fifth Avenue and be fine. But you have Alex Jones, you have Candace Owens, you have Tucker Carlson. These are not minor figures, right? And there's several others who were very vociferously MAGA supporters, very Team Trump on everything up until now. And then the other one we saw in the last week is Trump floated amnesty loudly and publicly for restaurant and farm workers. And you saw the exact same reaction we saw a few months ago when he, because the tech bros, part of it with Dodge, but there's a lot of the tech bros in the White House circle And a few months ago, they were talking about the H-1B visas, and Trump came out and said, we don't have enough tech workers, and we really need these H-1Bs. And so you saw this sizable portion of the MAGA base come out and say, go fuck yourself. Like, no. And we saw that this past week with this amnesty float, and the pushback was major.
Mhm.
So again, I actually think that this is healthy. The left does not do this. The right argues. There's a difference of opinion. It's a much bigger tent. And here's the thing too. Trump listens. He really does. We saw this in his first administration. Remember when he bombed Syria? Because he ran the first time on a more isolationist angle. But in his first term, I think that was like the first military thing he did. He bombed Syria. And there were some of the isolationists back then that were like, whoa, what are you doing? Like, we don't like this. And, Trump was like, trust me, there was intelligence, blah, blah, blah. So that schism is happening again. It's just bigger. And again, I think the discussion is healthy. We all lived through the Iraq War and the weapons of mass destruction that weren't. And I think that that's what a lot of people have PTSD from, which is like, we trust you generally, Trump, but could you be being lied to? Were they really a week away, a day away from the bomb this time and they weren't before? And, something happened 3 days ago that was extremely telling. It was a bit of a pivot point. Trump started using the word we, the pronoun we, when talking about it. And he didn't he talked about Israel, and then we. And a lot of people were like, what's this we shit? It's not it's a potential global catastrophe in World War III, but it's not my issue. I'm not super up on it. I'm more interested in the inner dynamics, the psychology of what's going on within the movement. I think it's very interesting. I think that all the players we're talking about it's really illuminating to kind of see how this works. And again, Trump does listen. You can say, Tucker Carlson and Candace and Dave Smith and Joe Rogan and Alex Jones aren't real MAGA and therefore they don't matter. But that's a lot of people. It's a big audience with those people. And that's a sizable chunk of Trump voters. And of course, Trump is not stupid. He's going to listen. Not that he's necessarily going to do what they say, but he is going to listen because he does listen. He listened when we made the H-1B thing. There was a major blowback. He heard it. He also heard the blowback from a few days ago with his amnesty. Like, he heard it, whether or not, he's going to stick to it, adjust it or abandon it. Who knows? He floats a lot of shit. He A/B tests a lot of his ideas in public. It's very frustrating. It's very sloppy, but it's effective in a way. And and more importantly, it is not the norm, right? Trump does this thing. You know who Bobby Fischer was, right? The chess player. Okay. So he played Spassky in the 60s, for the World Chess Championship. And Bobby Fischer, famously, came into there was a series of matches. He came into the first one and he didn't like how the board looked and he forfeited the game. And everybody was like, whoa, this is the big Cold War match. Long story short, Bobby Fischer, rallied and beat the commies. And they asked him afterwards, how he did this. And so chess masters, they study each person's games and they study all these historical games. They know all these moves, they know these gambits and things. And what Bobby Fischer essentially said is he said, look, I knew that this guy was a student of chess. Like, he knows all of the moves, he knows all the previous games, all the history, everything that you could do. And he goes, so what my plan is to take him into the jungle. I didn't want to play any game that he had seen before. And so my only strategy was to make enough moves to take him into a place he had never been before, because I knew if that happened, I would win. And that's kind of what Trump does. Trump is he's a chaos agent, and he does it on purpose. There's a lot of downsides to it, but Trump is better in chaos than anybody else. That's his realm. He's a master of it. He is cool as a cucumber. He does not get emotional. He keeps his eye on the prize. He just goes out there and he throws shit at the wall. He throws shit in the air. He fires fireworks. He does not care. He has an end goal. He'll tell you what his end goal is, and then he'll come out and he'll do it. It's pretty amazing. So that's a long way of saying is this Sturm und Drang, this chaos is a benefit to Trump. It's difficult to live through. it's not normal.
Okay.
It's exhausting, but he does it on purpose for the most part. And he changes his mind on a dime.
Okay.
And it's not because he's wiffly waffly. It's because he even said this yesterday with Iran. He said, you know what? I'm going to give it a 2-minute window, but I'm going to make my decision at the last moment because I can.
Okay.
Like, he literally says what he's going to do.
Yeah.
So
I wanted to comment on this other aspect about the split between interventionists and isolationists. And I agree with you that unlike the other side, these open disagreements are good. But one thing I think we're kind of falling short of, I would think that if we have open disagreements, it would also be an occasion to get people up to speed on what the facts are, right? Besides their own opinion. Like earlier today, we were talking about how the mechanics of how an appropriation bill works. Okay, so if people know more about that, it might be that how they interact with each other, the opposing views, the outcome would be different. So on the subject, I just want to comment this, and I don't want people to assume like, well, what side is he on? I noticed that with the people who take their geopolitical lessons from Tucker Carlson, Candace, and Alex Jones, is I noticed, and this is a very dispassionate assessment, they don't seem to take the occasion to help their audience understand some of the basic facts, like the difference between a Sunni and Shia Muslim. Maybe you could argue maybe that's not important to us, but it is a big deal. It explains a lot what's happening over there, and why we're being dragged into those conflict. They don't maybe explain how the Ayatollah got into power in the first place. Like, how many of Candace's audience know what happened in the 70s with the Iranian Revolution? Right, and who was the guy before that was overthrown, and what's going to happen next, and why is Iran maybe different than in Iraq? Do they know the difference between Persians and Iraqis? And then on the topic of Gaza, okay, you hear them say Palestine, but they don't seem to make the differentiation between Hamas and Palestinians. Which is a big deal, because Hamas is the people in power making the policy, and versus the people living in Gaza. So these are these nuances that I think that I don't know whether they deliberately skip so that they could simplify people's reaction, or I think that like you said, it's good that we have these open disagreements, but I also think that there is the opportunity here to get people to know more about these nuances, and then they realize at the end that there may not be that much of a split. We can all kind of agree on something. That's all. I know it's neither here nor there.
I mean, I think that you might be expecting too much of people. I find it easier to navigate this if you just kind of assume that the majority of people don't care. They're not going to learn. And then you have the people that voted for Trump who essentially trust Trump and his administration to learn and act on the kind of stuff that you described. And then, the next cycle, when Biden wins, you have most Biden voters can't be bothered to educate themselves on the intricacies of the issues of the day. And they expect the Biden administration to be on top of this shit and make the right decisions. That's just human nature. I don't know. I just, I don't know if we can expend energy on this sort of stuff, It's important. And I would argue that Trump has the microphone. He has the bully pulpit. And I think that he has very few opportunities to kind of do what you're talking about, like educating, people on certain things. And therefore it becomes a strategic play to, sort of what do you waste your oxygen on, right? Like, you can only, do so much. The American public will only want to learn, so much about, this, that, and the other thing. And he does do it to a degree. Remember Greenland, right? That seemed to come out of nowhere. He was like, I'm going to buy Greenland.
Yeah. Where's Greenland now? Is that just,
Yeah, Trump just floats shit. He's like,
okay.
He throws everything out there. A lot of it's stuff that he's serious about, wants. A lot of the stuff isn't. A lot of stuff's tester. Yesterday, he threw out this idea of selling federal land to build affordable housing on. And his, a large portion of his base was like, no, what are you doing? And then you had Mike Lee from Utah. And Utah is like 93% owned by the feds. And, this discussion ensued. Again, it was online mostly, but, is there a housing crisis? Is there really a lack of housing? Is getting rid of our federal land a smart thing to do? Will that solve what you're trying to solve? Does what you claim need to be solved actually need to be solved? And so this discussion did happen, but Trump just floated it. It wasn't very popular. Mike Lee got, taken to the cleaners on it. He kind of made himself look like a fool. But, this is what Trump does. He just throws shit out there. And the public is largely uninformed.
Okay.
Those are the realities, it's like, I tend to just accept those as, and prepare to be surprised, if something changes, but those are the realities, those are the table stakes.
I think what I'm just saying that whether you consider yourself an interventionist, an isolationist, you all have access to the tools to do your own research, and you'd be surprised you may come out different than what you think you may have previously. You might change your mind on things. So that's all I'm saying. And we're kind of coming up to the hour. Do we want to wrap up with anything?
In New York City?
Oh, yes. Thank you. I have a short PSA for anyone who might be tuning in from New York City. You're a registered Democrat voter. Yes, people don't know this, but in NDR, we are very diverse. We still have a lot of people who keep their registration for practical, not ideological reasons. If you don't already know, and you should know, this week till June 24th is early voting primary for a bunch of municipal races in New York. One is very consequential for the mayor of New York, and you might have heard some buzz about this guy. Wait here. So Zahran Mamdani. He's only been a U.S. citizen for 7 years. I think he's from Uganda, avowed socialist. And he is tracking very well with the extreme part of the Democrat Party, and so even Democrats in New York City are a little concerned. So my PSA is, if you still are a registered Democrat voter and you don't want to turn New York City into LA, you have now till June 24th, Tuesday, to go to the polls and do a ranked choice voting. We don't have time to tell you how that works, but basically you pencil in 3 candidates, and minus this one. Currently, the configuration is, and this is going to really annoy a lot of people, it's Cuomo. This guy, I can't get his name right. Anyway, you see him. It's a Cuomo, Tilley, a Whitney, a Cuomo, and then the third choice.
Yeah, Brad Lander.
Yeah, so you got to pick between Grandma Killer or this guy.
Yeah.
That's what it's come down to in New York. It's picking between the worst of the worst or the least of the worst. Imagine that we have to now move. Cuomo is considered least of the worst now.
Yes.
That's how awful things are. So, not telling you how to vote, but again.
And when I moved to New York City, a friend of mine said the election takes place in the Democrat primary. Right?
Exactly. You're right.
But
That's a very
right
good
after
point.
I moved, Giuliani won, and then Bloomberg won after him. So
that's such a great point, Eric. I want to repeat that. In New York, the way our politics is, the election happens in the primary on the Democrat side. If you want to mitigate whatever the worst is to come, if you're still a Democrat voter, just put your registration to good use and do that ranked choice voting. I know it's unbelievable.
Is New York City doing ranked choice now?
Yes, that's
what.
what.
Oh my God, those progressive morons.
I know, but it is what I'm just telling you, all of you out there. Just go out there, please. Don't sit on this. From now till June 24th, Tuesday. Find your polling, and go and rank choice. And again, I'm not telling you how to vote, but now currently, even the quote unquote moderate and moderate Democrats are suggesting Cuomo, Whitney Tilley. He's a Wall Street guy, and then some, and just pick a third one. And Eric Adams is running as an independent now. Independent. So that's it. I don't have a happy bean for you people today.
That's a terrible bean. All I would say is if the commie wins, or even if Cuomo wins, they're all so bad. No bailouts. I mean, no offense to all my friends that live in the city. You gotta at some point you have to live with what you vote for. The same goes for San Francisco. Same goes for Minneapolis. I hate to see people suffer, but a lot of these blue areas have made these really bad decisions over the last few decades, and the feds have come to the rescue in various ways and sort of either outright bailed them out, in some cases even rewarded bad decisions and bad behavior, and at the very least sort of mitigated the downsides. I think we got to stop doing that. I think that these are childish, dangerously naive notions that these people have. The world doesn't work this way. These are destructive, ideas and policies that have been proven to be destructive and awful, time and time and time again. They harm people, they kill people, they make everything worse for everybody. This quixotic, dumbass pursuit of, equity and fairness at all costs is just so harmful. So no bailouts. I'm sorry. It's like, exercise your right to vote for the Marxist, and good luck. Enjoy it.
Well, let me be precise. A lot of the people that in power in New York today are they're not voted in by the majority. Most people don't vote. That's another very sad fact. Okay, it's only like 20% who show up. And then the other thing, my parting commentary about public institutions in general in America, it's always astonishing to me how we are concerned about open borders, the physical open borders in the country. But I would argue that we got that way because there's another type of open borders happening, and that's in our public institutions. You let just about any type of creature get on the ballot. And that's one I don't understand. So my call to action to anyone who's watching, if you want to fix the physical open border problem, you have to really fix the open border in your public institutions too. And you are the border. You're supposed to be the border. You're supposed to be watching who gets on the ballot. So think about that, people. Okay.
Yeah.
Think about who you allow into public into your institutions. So, all right. Well,
that's all. Just the only thing I'll say there is that that's a whole other discussion. It's about psychology and human nature, but unfortunately, government attracts certain types of people.
Yes.
It's
That's
certainly
the
good
paradox.
people, with good hearts and, great intentions and good work ethic. And, they're honest and all that good stuff
We
that
don't
work
seek
in
out
government, but
government
they're the
as a
minority. Government bureaucracy and administration attracts a real kind of, icky personality type. And it's very hard to get them out once they're in.
That's such a great paradox, right? That the good people, the people who create value, have virtue, we don't tend to congregate around halls of power. We're out there making stuff. But then you have public institutions that attract these flies. That's the paradox we have to figure out. So great way to close out today's morning coffee stream, and have a great weekend, and I will see you next time. Thanks.
A good one.
Okay.